Hello, my name is Dave Turnblom, and I'm a professor of theology at the University of Portland. I'm a member of the CHIRP lab. CHIRP stands for Collaborative Humanities Investigating Religion and Power. We are an interdisciplinary working group that studies the way that power and religion influence one another. This video is part of a series in which we address key concepts that are really important for our ongoing work. This video will address the work of Iris Marion Young, in particular her concept of the 5 faces of oppression. In one of our previous key concept videos, we discussed the 3 signatures of power that allow us to see how power is influencing our lives. Philosopher Dean Mitchell describes 3 signatures of power: power over, power with, and power to. In this video, we will be discussing some specific examples of power over. And in order to do that, we will examine what Professor of Political Science Iris Marion Young has called the 5 faces of oppression. These 5 types of oppression are described at length in Chapter 2 of her book, Justice and the Politics of Difference. Specifically, the 5 types of oppression are exploitation, marginalization, powerlessness, cultural imperialism, and violence. We're going to begin by examining exploitation. Young writes, "The central insight expressed in the concept of exploitation, then, is that this oppression occurs through a steady process of the transfer of the results of the labor of one social group to benefit another." A concrete example of this would be the way that the Roman Catholic Church has used the labor of nuns to run schools. In the past, rather than paying them a living wage, nuns volunteered to teach, and this saved the schools an immense amount of money. Now, justice in the face of exploitation requires a reorganization of institutions, practices of decision-making, and alterations of division of labor. So, to fight this form of oppression, it is necessary that workers be paid a living wage for their work so that they can share in the benefits of their labor. For this reason, many religions, including Roman Catholicism, champion the idea of labor unions as being important social structures to help avoid exploitation. The next form of oppression we're going to look at is marginalization. Young writes, "Marginalization is perhaps the most dangerous form of oppression. A whole category of people is expelled from useful participation in social life and thus potentially subjected to severe material deprivation and even extermination. An example of marginalization would be the exclusion of women from positions of religious leadership. Many religions marginalize women from holding leadership positions, such as being rabbis, priests, and imams. To address marginalization, it's important to restructure those forms of society that would keep them marginalized. For example, many religious communities have placed women in leadership roles, making them into rabbis, priests, and imams." The third form of oppression we're going to examine is powerlessness. Young writes, "The powerless have little or no work autonomy, exercise little creativity or judgment in their work, have no technical experience or authority, express themselves awkwardly, and do not command respect." Powerlessness is primarily about the type of work done by a group. And for Young, this is primarily a matter of how respectable a certain type of work is. For example, in many religions, the ordained ministers, such as priests and rabbis, enjoy a position of power because their work is seen as sacred. They do the preaching, the teaching, and the governing of their community. In contrast, the unordained, that is to say the lay people, have work that is secular or profane. As such, their work is less respectable than the sacred work of ministers. So the lay people take orders from their ministers. Now, this form of oppression often results in class divisions or caste systems. To fight against this form of oppression, it is important to involve people at all levels of a society in the decision-making processes. This is what Catholic social teaching calls the principle of subsidiarity. This brings us to our fourth form of oppression, cultural imperialism. To experience cultural imperialism means to experience how the dominant meanings of a society render the particular perspective of one's own group invisible at the same time as they stereotype one's group and mark it out as other. In short, cultural imperialism is a way of erasing someone's culture and forcing them to adopt the dominant culture. For example, in some European countries such as France, there have recently been laws banning Muslim girls from wearing the hijab in public. The dominant French culture is seeking to culturally assimilate Muslims by erasing the public presence of Muslim culture. As a result, Muslim women have the experience of being erased from the public eye, while simultaneously being labeled as an outsider whose cultural identity doesn't belong. To combat this form of oppression, societies need to celebrate cultural diversity, creating opportunities for cultures to learn from one another. The fifth and final face of oppression is violence. And this form of oppression is made possible by cultural imperialism. Young writes, "What makes violence a face of oppression is less the particular acts themselves, though these are often utterly horrible, than the social context surrounding them, which makes them possible." Because cultural imperialism defines someone as an outsider who doesn't belong, the dominant culture often sees them as a threat. This results in the oppressed group living under a constant threat of violence. For example, many religious communities will demonize the LGBTQ community. Through cultural imperialism, the LGBTQ people are forced to hide their culture and identity and adopt the approved ways of living. This creates what Jung calls a social context that surrounds them with a constant threat of violence. If they don't follow the dominant culture, members of the LGBTQ community are subject to acts of terror, sexual assault, harassment, and ridicule. So to combat this form of oppression, societies must champion human rights. For example, many religious communities emphasize the inherent dignity of every human person as a beloved child of God. So, in this video, we have seen that having power over others can take many forms: exploitation, marginalization, powerlessness, cultural imperialism, and violence. For those of us working in the Chirp Lab, these 5 faces of oppression are excellent ways to analyze the ways in which religious activity can be oppressive. However, religious activity can also work against these forms of oppression and strive for a more just society. Thank you.